I'm thankful to the Fortis team for putting this together with us. This is a mental well-being or a mental health sort of a session we've been doing at a marathon level, I would say. So this is the fourth session in a 6-part series, which include on Saturday. And having said this, we have today with us Ms. Geetika Kapoor. Geetika, welcome to IPN session. In fact, glad to have you with us. And for a very formal introduction to Geetika Kapoor, Ms. Geetika Kapoor, I'll just quickly read out to what I have been given with. Geetika Kapoor is a school psychologist and founder of Ed Essentials with over 15 years of experience. Give me a moment. Let me just quickly make someone the co-host. Would you mind, Geetika, while people are admitting, you can just admit them all by any chance by the time I'm speaking out for you? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
No problem at all.
Yeah, with over 15 years of experience working with educators, parents, and children in the area of education and remediation, our primary training is in the field of school psychology from Kansas, USA. Ms. Kapoor has subsequently diversified her profile by upgrading her skills in behavior analysis, special education, and content analysis for academic curriculums. Ms. Kapoor is registered as a rehabilitation professional in the National Register of Rehabilitation Council of India. She provides educational and psychological therapy to children in both school as well as clinical settings. She actively consults with schools for setting up evidence-based practices for regular as well as special needs groups of students. In addition, Ms. Kapoor provides supervision to school counselors and special education teachers from different schools. Welcome, Geetika. Good to have you with us. Very distinguished career, I would say. All the very best, and over to you. All yours.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I think my clicks worked with admit all. Please keep your eye there. Very lovely to meet all of you. Very, very, very accomplished leaders in the community and who are the torch bearers for our next generations, leading the young minds into the next millennia. So I think mental health, I always quote this that the past 6 months, we've had a journey worth 6 years. The learning curve has been steep. We have overcome a lot of challenges that we had not experienced, not expected, and we are still learning. It has not ended. And that's one of the ways I think that life has put forth, or I should say nature has put forth the life skills curriculum imposed on all of us and say, here is your challenge, come on board. So now for me, as a school psychologist, I have been trained to tune in to the emotional well-being, to academic or cognitive growth of learners, to work with systems to say, how do we come together as a community and enable or foster well-being in our students or best outcomes, as I was trained in a very Western model. So I say they are very outcomes oriented, and what are the objectives that we'll set forth for our academic year or say a 5-year plan of sorts. So now, I think foremost of the life skills that I want to emphasize here is of reframing, of flexibility. How when we are faced with hardships, when we are faced with difficult times, what do we do to respond? Whether we get stuck in our mind and say, I'm not used to this. This is not my cup of tea. I was never trained to do this. This was not what I signed up for. Versus being flexible and responding and saying, okay, now this is what the situation is. What is my assessment about my role? Where do I need to pick up more skills? Who are the other people I need to align with in order to overcome what I've been faced with? In fact, that has been one of the basic crux the past 6 months. People who have been flexible in their outlook to problems, flexible in adapting, fast in learning new skill sets and not saying this is not for me have been on board. Teachers and schools, I think that has been the most challenging position because most of us were not screen friendly people up till this point. In fact, we had been advocating to vigorously against screen time. We had been discouraging our learners to get away from screens. And when we had to make friends with screens, we were like, what is wrong? This is not for me. We are doomed from here on, and we will never come back as a human race. So this is where our learning has been that we've even overcome this phase. We've made friends. We have redefined the goals that our curriculums are trying to achieve. And we are now saying, bring it on. Bring on the next challenge and we'll overcome even that. And this is where I would say that the life skills training has been at its best on job in saying, learn this and test yourself. When I look at emotional well-being for school children and say, what is life skills or emotional well-being to do with school children and how do I apply? I always have seen a divide between life skills education and curricular teaching in saying that life skills or emotional training or training to take care of ourselves emotionally will happen in other periods and curriculums are going to happen in other periods. And now this anyways is very disjointed for the learner who's receiving. Also for us to say that learners anyway see digital science and all that they do. And then if we say life skills is now another area that you need to look at, but it never comes together. And that is also for us to say that life skills need to be owned by the school community at large, which is my English language arts teacher or my mathematics or science teacher. They all need to imbibe this language, which says, what do we do when life is difficult? What do we do when, so a learner can be faced by many challenges, and the challenges could first be by saying, what am I good at? Whenever we are facing difficult times, we do not respond by our weaknesses. We respond from our strength points. And for a learner to be able to articulate this clearly, what am I good at? In fact, that has been my journey with learners. Whenever I interview and start with question, tell me some of your strengths. What are you good at? I would see a very modest reply on nothing much. When I have to go on, opening that conversation and say, come on, you must have felt proud sometimes. You did something, a very little thing, but tell me what made you feel good about yourself. Now, that is a question that I put to all my educators also, that you as individuals need to be able to say, not arrogantly, but with confidence, owning up that this is my skill set of strengths. This is what I bring to table. Whenever you need any help, remember me for this skill set. When we are able to articulate this very clearly, we as a community start becoming stronger. So connect that I'm trying to make here is that we as educators are role models. We are framing the language of life skills to our learners in saying that when I hear my adults, my significant others, respond to this question about what are you good at? What can you do for me? What do you bring to table? And how do I see my teachers, my mom, my dad, my uncle, my bua respond to that question? And when I listen to them, I realize, okay, this is what we can say when someone says like that, versus a child who's never experienced this language of strengths, or this person who's heard language of strengths, but has always heard it with arrogance, almost that they've hated people who have who've been emphasizing their strengths because the tone of speaking was not friendly, or the message that was coming from that message was not seeming comfortable. So what do I do? Never talk about your strengths. Focusing on your strengths is not good. And this is how our human mind has been framed from early childhood to pick on goods, bads, classify actions in people in good and bad, and as emotional health torchbearer. I have to start from the point of strengths. And if I meet anybody, an adult or a young soul, in saying, I don't know what my strengths are, I get worried. I get worried because I almost am seeing at a vulnerable self who, when faced with hardships, may likely come crashing down, thinking I am a failure. I am no good. I can't do anything. And those are the times when, if I have a very well defined set of my strengths, I can fall back on those and say, no, I am good at some things. It may be tiny things, but I have achieved some bit. So now, when I am talking to my learners, and as a professional, have honed very much around remedial education for dyslexia, so I may have only 44 phonograms that my learners have to master. But when they are confronted with 44, it looks like a humongous task in front of them. And the first reaction is, I can't do that, miss. That's too much. So now the idea is, how do I respond to that learner and say, I can't do it? So I, as a teacher, has this responsibility of breaking that task into small chunks. My learner has not learned that skill as yet, how to break the task. Because I have had the experience as a teacher to say, okay, this is what the whole curriculum has been about. I will break it into manageable chunks and give them one at a time. Now, when my learner says, okay, this much I can do, miss, I think I can master this much. They start with the confidence and boom, they step in and they get errors. They get errors and there would be, ma'am, can we do this tomorrow? I don't feel very well today. Can we play that other game? Or do you know what you were talking the other day? So this is my signs that are picked from my learners and saying, are you trying to avoid the task at hand? Is it getting too difficult for you? So now is the time for me that, see, we decided on 10 phonograms. You gave me beautiful responses on 4, which means 6 need to be mastered. Now, do you want to help me choose the next 2 that you're going to master with me? So now when I reflect back as a teacher in saying, are you avoiding? That is my first pinpointing to the learner, to the language of emotional health, and say, okay, was I trying to avoid? And at some later stage, when I am reading a story, when I am reading history lessons with them, and I come across an emperor who hid behind the walls, trying to make a strategy for the attack, and I come back with my avoidance question, was this emperor trying to avoid the situation? And my learner is now witnessing the same vocabulary. I use the same word, avoidance. When the learner was with me, making their own errors, and when I am discussing a history of an emperor, this is where life starts coming together for my learners and say, I don't think, miss, I don't think that emperor was trying to avoid. And the question is, why do you think so? Because he was still thinking about what to do about the problem. He was not doing something else. Do you remember the other day when I was trying to avoid? I started talking about the game. This emperor was not doing that. Now, what I am putting forth to you is my conversation with a very tiny 6-year-old who has been in training for a long time with me, but now this is where, when we as educators start talking about language, focusing on the words we use to point to the difficult or the reaction to difficulties in our learners quickly pick that up and they start using the same language when they feel in difficult times the next time, or when they witness their peers, their family members facing through the same difficulties, and they come here that, Mama, are you trying to avoid this conversation with me? Believe me, families, when they start celebrating schools, this is what they're wanting from us. They're wanting schools to be able to give them the vocabulary that families were not trained in. That's when we start celebrating the culture of the school. And that has been my journey the past 15 years, is that what is the language of the school that we are trying to weave into conversations? How as teachers we respond to failures or errors or the naughty behavior of our learners, because a lot of times a student who was trying to bunk my class could have tried to escape a difficult experience, whatever that experience was. And here I have to say, what happened to you the other day? I thought you were not present in the school, and then I saw you in the field. And I was wondering what happened. We had that important test going on, right? And that's where my learner is that can I come back to you later? Is fine. And I think as teachers, we need to have this flexibility, this opportunity for our learners to say, I do not know how to respond to you right now. Can I talk to you later? At a later point. And when I come back later, I want to have trust in you that you will contain all my anxiety. You will frame my problem in a way that brings forth the next step. So what was it that you were trying to escape the other day? Oh, miss, it was not escaping. My friend was coming after a long, long gap, and I wanted to spend more time with my friend. Okay, that was a doable thing, but now what do you think you're going to do about the test that you missed? Well, I don't know. So you know that opportunity is gone, and you will not know what you did in the periodic table, how much you've learned the periodic table, because that test was about the periodic table. So I'm thinking sometimes life is about choices, isn't it? You have this dear friend that you do not want to miss out on, and you have an important meeting that is coming along your way, and you have to decide between the two. So life is about choices. And if I end my meeting on this note, this learner is more likely to come back to me about, do you think I made a wrong choice? Well, that's not for me to decide. That's for you to decide. I just saw that you had a choice and you chose one. I'm sure you had some good reasons about that. Now, this is reframing my language of talking to my learners, because a lot of times, culturally, as a psychologist, I see a lot of punitiveness when we respond to our learners' mistakes in saying this is wrong, you should not be bunking. And a learner who either fears punishment, submits to being present in the classroom, but may not be emotionally convinced about why they should be in the classroom. And that's when they meet a less strict teacher, they bunk again. A teacher who's not defined the need to be in the classroom, they run away again, only an year later to realize that I did not meet the requirement of 75% attendance, and I will not get my admit card now. And the pleading match starts with the school in saying, well, you should have known better. Our learners do not know better because we were not thinking with them. We were not making them own that decision of being with me in the class because there was a learning opportunity there, or being in the field to meet a friend who was coming after a long time. So this is another life skill that I do not need to teach as a separate class in my school. This is a life skill of choices, where how do we decide what to go with, what to respond to, that shows up every now and then in our classrooms. In fact, right now when we are meeting our learners on the screens, there is a big tussle about whether to keep our cameras on or off, whether to keep our mics on or off. Especially, I'm talking about the older ones. Even with younger ones, some of them are feeling left out. Ma'am doesn't talk to me. Or I wrote a response in the chat box. Sir never noticed my response. I'm not going to go to that class because that class is not interesting enough. These are my conversations happening every day with my learners. And the idea is, how do I make my learner think about this situation, not to give a solution to the learner? And I am astonished by the problem solving ability of young 5-year-olds in saying, what could you do if ma'am did not notice your message in the chat box? That's the first time somebody is asking them what to do. And then the position is, can I write again? Yes, definitely you can write again. Mama, can you talk to ma'am on my behalf? Yes, Mama can definitely talk on your behalf. And when I start seeing this language in a 5-year-old, I hold the promise of language development in children that we as educators can facilitate. That's an important life skill for all to have. That I am in a situation I do not know what to do about. How do I navigate this situation? What do I do? So what are my choices at hand? That's a language that we say when I am faced with a difficult or an unexpected situation. That's what we all did, didn't we? With the COVID-19, it was unprecedented. We did not know what to make of this situation. Suddenly, we were like in our four walls, and we had to make contact with the outside world only with help of our screens. We could not touch our learners, we could not feel them, we couldn't hug them, we couldn't have that eye-to-eye conversations with them. And suddenly we had to come up with what to do now. This is a lot of intuitive problem solving that all of us have done. Now the challenge of life skills is, and if you ask a psychologist, it is all about words. Words that I will give to this problem solving. What did I do? What happened inside me? Where were the blockages coming? What were my experiences that I wanted to avoid, but I didn't avoid? What was the self-dialogue that went on inside me? When we start articulating all that with our learners, what starts happening is our learners start talking to back in the same language. When they start talking to us in the same language, we suddenly feel satisfied as educators. We did our job. They are now free. They are independent of us. We don't need to script everything from them. And that's also a lot of times our learners start helping each other. This is how my teacher responds when somebody does not get the marks. She says, tell me where you're feeling stuck. What did not make sense to you? And one day when Miss is not in the class, what happens? A classmate steps in. Tell me what is difficult for you. Where are you feeling stuck? And this is where we start seeing peer-to-peer learning instead of a teacher to student learning, because as a teacher, I will be very limited. After a point of time, I need more hands, more brains to work with me. And if I am the only sole torch bearer of the curriculum and of life skills and of emotional well-being and of extracurricular self-development and of temperament development, I'm going to crash. I cannot do it all. So I need all these co-torch bearers with me, whether they are my colleagues at school, Or, and that's where I think we start talking, celebrating schools as communities. A teacher is not alone. She has a whole team backing her with the thought system, with the problem solving strategies. And sometimes it's not us, the adults, it's peer to peer learning that we are facilitating in the classroom. So our role as teachers has been largely not about teaching them the periodic table. It has not been about teaching them the phonograms. It has been about modeling the language of problem solving for our learners, in saying, okay, this was a difficult moment. In fact, the most difficult moment I think as educators we've felt is when we've had to had public lectures, public lessons, because our lesson delivery right now has been open to the whole world. We've had parents sitting in our lessons. And the idea has been, what do I do if I am interrupted by a parent about with a question or about a dissatisfaction with my style of teaching? When I have the audience of my 40 students looking at me with curious eyes, that how is ma'am going to respond to it? What is she going to do when a teacher or when a parent is asking her a difficult question? Now, these are my moments where instead of shutting down or saying, I don't know what to do, or even sometimes having an anxiety attack, I don't want to go to that class again. That parent is too difficult for me. And these are very human experiences that we have been having as teachers. We are not above our emotions at all. In fact, our emotions are what make us the best we are. And that's when I say I felt attacked. I felt insecure. I felt unsafe in that moment. I felt insufficient in that moment. That's my vocabulary of emotions. In fact, I, as a school psychologist, would say at least 50 beautiful vocabulary words, emotional vocabulary words need to be in our kitty if we want to start honing this emotional well-being for us, in saying that if I can precisely name the emotion that is going on inside me, I am much more likely to approach that situation in a productive, flexible way than saying, I don't know what happened. I don't know what I was going through. I don't know what happened between me and that colleague. And that's the moment when we start freezing up. And that's a learning opportunity that my learner saw and said, whenever somebody talks to you harshly, you should change the topic. When somebody is confronting you with a problem and they are being loud, shut the call. And that's not what we want happening with our learners. We want them to know that if somebody is talking to me in an unpleasant way, I could reflect back and say, tell me what is going on. What are you feeling right now? What is not making sense to you? Okay, can I talk to you at a silent time? This is more urgent right now, but what you're going through is also urgent for me. Can I come back to you again? Now, this is also an opportunity that my learners will witness, and slowly they start using the same vocabulary and start saying to their classmates and saying, what is going on with you? What is difficult for you? Do you want to talk to me privately? Voila, we are done. And my life skills curriculum has been delivered beautifully just by everybody in the school. I would stop at that moment. I will open up for questions or comments, whatever you all want to share with me.
Wonderful. In fact, some profound words, I would say a lot of food for thought people will go back with, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. So I will open the house for a Q&A. Let's have a healthy sort of a conversation. And even if you have an observation to make, please feel free to say so. Okay. So, no, I think if I can quickly make an observation, because I see that with my daughters, because they are fairly young, as I said, right? That really your choice of words really sometimes make a situation or breaks a situation with them as well. and really, it really shapes the way they are thinking or maybe they're acting. It really is. And initially, the sort of a vocabulary you develop for yourself is typically is your response to a situation as well that defines your, say, I mean, if I'm possibly jargonizing it, if I may say, if I know that when I am threatened, I have to go and possibly become a little shy. So that's like a behavior I'm getting myself conditioned to over a period of time. And then suddenly that becomes my second nature. I start behaving very similar every time I'm confronted with that as a situation. And I've seen that in my younger daughter and my elder in a very two different scenarios. And then my job was cut out as to how do I navigate them out, because we thought somehow they were in a way, typically, if I may say, they were not very positive at that sort of a situation. They were not very, very upbeat about that.
Gaurav, I would respond to this actually. As a psychologist, our basic training was about observing our own selves.
Mm-hmm.
And there are these two constructs we say, our self as experiencers and our self as observers.
Okay.
Both reside in us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the experiencing self is generally just responding to the situations that are happening outside us.
Correct.
But there is a self that is noting every time what I did, why I did it, what was it response to. And that's when the moment of reflection, when I start taking that time, in fact, meditative time, reflection time is very, very important that we need to model for our younger generation. Correct. Because that's the time where I will activate my observing self.
Correct.
What happened? What did I do that in response to? Correct. And more we are able to articulate those states. Correct. We start acting on it by conscious choice. Correct. Do I want to continue doing that? And that could be completely fine if that's my choice. Correct. Or if I say, no, I want to change that pattern a bit. And then my question is going to be, what is it about that pattern that you want to shift? That's also like food for thought. And a lot of times our questions do not just arrive. We need to sleep on some of those questions.
Yes, yes.
Then we have the aha moments. And that's also with my young learners sometimes. They get stuck. They don't know what to do. And that's the time for me to break away. Is it okay if we talk tomorrow about it? You think about it. And the next day, they are after me to say, Miss, I thought about it. I want to speak to you again. And I would be, let's have a time where nobody will disturb us, where I'm not distracted with other things. And that's when I start having my talking communities in the school.
No, I completely echo the same sort of a view. Even as an adult today, when I sit back in the night, I give myself 30 minutes to reflect back on what I did over the course of the day. Was I really at my best? Maybe I was a little harsh on my employee example, or maybe I could have been a better individual. And I think that's a very, very important point you make, that maybe when you reflect back, sometimes you actually come back and feel that you could have handled that situation a little more better possibly. And second is breaking the chain. Sometimes we want to react so soon. And you know, I have always realized whenever you give yourself a little more time, you're a better version of yourself. So don't always jump the gun. I've always seen situations which have been hopeless, but then the moment we gave them time, they became better. Automatically, they became better actually. Fair point, open. I would love to have more questions. This was purely, I was filling in for you guys. So anyone want to have a quick question, show of hand, or otherwise, how should I do this? Because I'm sure if we have an observation, or I'm seeing few people asking me on the chat window, but having said this, I would love to ideally have you on a show of hand and ask a question. Khalil साहब, आपसे start करें आज? अगले साल हर बार वैसे लेट हो रहा था. I think Seema ji se पूछ लेते हैं. Seema ji is asking a question, then I'll come to you. Okay? Yeah. Good to have you. Seema ji, question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. A very good evening, everyone. Just wanted to ask beautiful insights. I feel personally, I feel if the world starts to reflect, I think it will be a better place to live in,
Correct.
first of all. So thank you so much, everybody, for saying that. I was just wondering, ma'am, if possible, I mean, how do we go about it? I've been trying to do it. I have a school counselor, and then there's me. But how do we go about in a step-by-step training for the other teachers? Because I somehow feel like has been echoed in a way with you also, that each teacher needs to be a counselor at one level, right? We can't always run to one person. Sometimes all of us need to have that compassion, all of us have to have the skill of listening and understanding. So how do we go about training those who feel, no, my job is just to teach the subject and take care of the marks, because that no longer should be a priority, is what I feel.
Beautiful question. So Seema ji, one, I need to say this,
That
that as a community, we also need to do a reflective exercise about when we meet during our faculty meetings, when we do our board meetings, what is the emphasis of these meetings? Because when I have to bring the lens strongly on emotional well-being and emotional dialoguing, it has to start from the top.
absolutely.
The school management, the board, the superintendents of the school, the supervisors and the principals, because this is where, when we put emphasis largely on the results, or what has been the achievements of our learners, a lot of times emotional well-being is about our failures, not
Absolutely.
our successes.
Hmm.
Emotional well-being, and this is also where, when we have been having dialogues with the teachers about how many students participated in the discussion with you. That is
Okay.
a very beautiful lens to see how many students are actually participating, because at the end of the day we have few vocal voices that
Hmm.
become the perspective, that seems like the perspective of the whole community.
Hmm.
Within my teaching fraternity, during the meetings, I have very few voices that kind of rule the meetings. And then I have very submissive, very informative, possibly, but submissive voices who feel shy,
Yes.
hesitant for different reasons, and they will not speak up.
True.
I, as a school leader, how do I empower these shy voices in my school community? Will also do the trick of modeling. How do I involve more and more young souls who are anxious, who are shy, who do not want to speak up because of whatever? How do I
Absolutely.
encourage asking doubts? What do I do as a teacher? And I think you are talking to me as a school leader.
Yes,
What do
ma'am.
I do as a school leader when people ask me silly questions? Because a lot of silly questions also have insights, but
Yes.
it is my response to silly questions. Sometimes, it is my just one grimace,
Hmm.
my non-verbal, that shuts people down completely. Or if I lean forward with my
Hmm.
body language and I put my hand under my chin and I say, tell me more about it,
Hmm.
suddenly the person who was thinking that question is a silly question starts talking more. No, there is no easy answer to it. It is
Ma'am,
going to
what
be a paradigm cultural shift within the school.
we have that cultural shift, ma'am. We are a small school,
Awesome.
and we do have not more than 24 students per class. My thing does not come from this side of the seesaw, if I can say. Here on the managerial side, things are fine. They will come and ask whatever they want to. They are never stopped on that. They can email it to us also, and we have every meeting there is also my feel good factor and what could have gone better. These things are absolutely in place. The only issue comes is sometimes, teachers get into a nutshell. Ki, ma'am, how do I handle it in class? There's one asking over here, there is another one crying over there, there's that happening over there. So what I was trying to see was, ki, how do I give them a kind of a professional approach to this? Handling the class in there, because sometimes they get all jittery, because now the rules are so many rules in place. बच्चे को ये नहीं बोलना है, this can hurt the child, and it is happening, and it is rightfully so also. But that actually puts them in a shell, and they just pass the buck. Okay, we will send her to the counselor.
So, Seema ji, thank you for reframing what you asked.
Thank you.
I would once say that this training has to be continued training. It is not a one-time training. I know my journey as a psychologist has been a long, long journey in becoming what I have become. So one nugget I would try to give also is, how do we encourage reflection time as a school community? I have my roughly 4 questions that I like to ask.
Okay.
One is, if I write routinely, what was it that made me feel adequate today?
Okay.
It could be for teachers, it could be for students. That's my question number 1. My question number 2 is going to be, what were some uncomfortable feelings that showed up for me today?
Okay.
Question number 3, what was I doing at that moment?
Okay.
Or what was happening around me at that moment? And the most difficult question number 4 is, what did I do in response to that emotion?
Lovely. Yeah.
So when we start as a community to share what made me feel adequate today as a teacher, I first start from a moment of strength.
Right.
When then I say, what were some uncomfortable feelings that showed up, I now start everybody opening up about their vulnerabilities.
Absolutely. Very difficult to do.
Some of my community members may want to do it as a small group or an individual exercise. Some of them may be comfortable doing it in larger groups.
Okay.
But more and more reflections that start happening within the school like this, our teachers start owning up the emotional vocabulary.
Absolutely.
The facilitators of these groups have to be very well trained so that they do not let any emotionally difficult moment go unchecked or go silent. More and more struggles teachers are able to express, and it is going to be about bringing in more training for them. So if they're not able to say respond to a child who's jumping around all the time and yet deliver the lesson that they had programmed for today, that's a genuine difficulty. And if I have to say, well, give it time, no, we have to actively solve that situation for that teacher. And that's where we will have to handhold them with training and skills.
Right. Thank you so much, ma'am. It couldn't have been put in better words. Thank you so much for the clarity. And I got those 4 questions, and I'm surely going to be working on that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gaurav sir.
Most welcome. Quick, I had a question, one of the question on the chat window, I'm picking that up. I think that's Dr. Shashikala who has, how can you, give me a moment, I think, how can you help children who are talented, yet they feel they cannot perform in front of a crowd?
Okay. Do you know, ma'am, online interactions has been a boon to many of my learners. They have done away with all the time scrutiny, social scrutiny that comes with physical presence of a large audience. They can comfortably hide behind their camera and show me what they're best at. And if I ask them, do you want to go back to school? The answer is big no. I don't want to go back to school. So this norm of speaking in front of a large audience has unfortunately been taken as a normal norm. It is not. All of us have our different strengths, and all of us do not have to showcase those strengths publicly in front of 100 or 1000 or 1 lakh audience all the time. Some of us are private people. Some of us are going to stick to our strengths, do our bit for the humanity behind shut doors, and still we are going to make a big difference to the community. So I am trying to say, let's change that norm a bit. All our children are sped through a bell curve, right? They are not going to fit into one mold. So I would say if a student is very talented, let's see how do we hone that strength area without necessarily pushing them, because sometimes when we push them for the worse. All their strengths get shadowed by that one weakness. So in this moment, I would say if that weakness was speaking in front of 1000 people, that was just one weakness. That person can have 100 other strengths. So let me hone those 100 strengths. Why do I have to make it all about one weakness in that learner's life?
Yep. Gets it answered. I think people, again, you're getting a lot of true affirmations on your answers.
Okay, that's good for my confidence building. Thank you, everyone.
I thought I should. Yeah, Rohini Kapoor, you have a question? Please unmute yourself and ask, ma'am. Soma Bhattacharya. Bhattacharya.
Good evening, ma'am. Thank you so much for that beautiful input. And I really appreciate you for picking up such a topic. My question is this, that how do one go ahead? One person may be handling these children, but it is not that one person, it is a community which you have to deal with. And very often what happens is it is interpreted as that you being a lenient, or you don't want to handle, or it is not supported by the community as such. So at that junction, the position of the person or the teacher becomes very difficult. How do you think such a situation could be handled?
Somaji, good question, and I would say a difficult question for me to answer. I will try to respond to it the best I think right. So when you were saying what makes it difficult for me is that your question is holding teacher as an individual. And I, for one, would not want a teacher to feel that alone in a school system. It is a community and it is a system, and we need to build on that strength. As a community of teachers, educators, we all will have our different strengths. And remember this, all of us are not going to be good at everything. We all will try to hone our skills. We all will try to become better. But every now and then, I will have to bring in a colleague, confer with somebody and say, could you help me with this? I would advocate very strongly for the community to have this fallback plan, that dependability on each other, and say, if you're struggling, I will handhold you. If you're going through a problem, I am there to help you. And sometimes it's not about just telling what to do, it's about joining hands and doing it together as a community, because that's when we strengthen each other with our own skill sets. One important point, I think this was about, I think it's been a decade now, but newly when the corporal punishment was banned in schools, I suddenly was confronted with so much need on how do I make students listen to me? How do I make them do what I want them to do as a teacher? because they were trained to respond to what I, as a psychologist, know as negative reinforcement, which is they will work under threat. But if there is no threat, they will not want to be with me in the classroom. And that's where, as a teacher, I need to say, okay, how do I make myself welcoming, attractive partner, a learning partner as a teacher, where my learner is saying, I want this ma'am or this sir as my teacher next year. Or if I have my principal being knocked down on that, I want that teacher, why didn't you allot that teacher to my class this year? Now, this is the difference where I, as an educator, will motivate my learners, where I am not coming from a position of threat or some kind of bossiness, and I'm saying, bring it on. We will work together. And a lot of times, the way I am responding to my students will have a ripple effect among my staff, my community, and say something different is happening in that class. Let's witness it together. So one, Somaji, I think it is never going to be about individuals in the school system. It is always be about collective in the school system and how we are going to stand with each other. Very well connecting to what Seema ji said earlier, I think it is about continuous dialoguing. In fact, a lot of times I feel that faculty meetings at schools become very cut and dry about lesson plans and teacher diaries and what came and what did not come. We need to start having a lot more dialogue about what worked well today, what did not go well today, what is the most difficult challenge that you're facing right now in your classroom, what can we do to problem solve. And frankly, if I have too many advisors and no actors coming and holding my hand, I would be wary of that situation, because that's also one of the roadblocks of sharing. If I start getting too much advice, I stop sharing.
Exactly.
Well said.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think, and we pray that such a situation happens everywhere. Thank you so much.
We'll take one more question. Richa Prakash, your question, please.
Thank you, Gaurav. I have been attending all these sessions, and I'll take this less than 2 seconds to say thank you to all of you and to your association with the particular group of psychologists and counselors. This has been very helpful. So my question as a school leader is, how do I assist my teacher in dealing with her emotional stress and also to help her build life skills? How do I do it at a personal level as a school leader?
Richa ji, let's make that the agenda. I know we have been voicing this very strongly, life skills for learners, for children. Let's talk about life skills for adults. In fact, I think when I focus on teachers as torch bearers, I have a better ripple effect and multiplier that goes down to my young learners than having one school counselor take all the onus of life skills education. It is not going to have the same effect at a societal level. In fact, having a lot of similar training for parents in the school community where teachers and parents start talking the same language, disciplining or having our partnership with our learners, our young minds, where we are using words and not threats to bring everybody to their best potential is an important skill to be trained in. And yes, we need to do this training actively for our teachers. In fact, some comments said in the chat box that we as teachers need to be emotional managers for ourselves and for our learners. And I said, whosoever said that, beautifully put. That's the training we are looking at. And I I would say as a community, we always have welcomed talking. As a South Asian community, we've never shied away from talking. In fact, we love talking. We just need to put that talking in a productive framework, in a problem-solving framework, where it is not only about catharsis or venting out, it is about finding solutions. It is about knowing who will take this forward and not let our problems stay unsolved for too long. That's where I think the problems become larger.
Fantastic. Richa,
Yeah,
you there?
I have another, I guess I'll reframe it.
Sure.
I'm looking at, you mentioned about meetings. I have myself attended meetings as a teacher earlier in my career, and the meetings were really boring, very banal. But you, of course, had to keep alive and, happening, because you could be just asked something randomly. So this is something I really don't do in my meetings. We are, keep it very short, so that, people don't get bored, and it's not more like a sermon, and it's more like talking, which is more productive. But what I was asking you, like in these times, in some of our schools now, teachers are allowed to come, so they are coming over. So how do we make that connect, I mean, do we have a coffee together or something like that from a distance, of course, without the mask, because we need to drink it up. So do we have these kind of short, sessions with teachers, which, help them de-stress at their workplace also, because they are, I think, very, very stressed all the time these days.
So one, ma'am, I'm going to say this. Talking about emotions is not always easy, and opening up to just anybody is also not easy. So I would once say, if you can, and I see great motivation in this group. I am delighted to be part of this. So Gauravji, thank you for having me here. One, I think, ma'am, we need to understand that whenever we come together as emotional confidant, in fact, I, as a psychologist, got trained in saying how to open a meeting. And as young psychologists, I would, start with some serious questions every time. And what I learned by my mentors was just ask, how are you doing? How was your day? And that's a good conversation starter. The only thing we need to start preparing ourselves very well as listeners is that we need to start opening ourselves to anything that comes as the answer. Because we are conditioned to hear few types of answers, and it becomes a very automatic kind of conversation. So if I ask you, how are you doing? You may say very well. That's a conditioned response. And then when I start digging deeper and saying, no, seriously, how are you? That's when the conversation would begin.
Right.
So have a community where people feel that's safe to open up will take a lot of committed action, ma'am. And I will feel you all the luck for that. Please take it forward.
Wonderful. I think I should be thanking you, Gitika. You've been wonderful in not just taking up the questions, but I think your replies have been, I use the word profound, and that's a very, very strong word, as I said, right? I don't use it very often. So very fantastic, great job, in fact. And talking about IPN, this is a fantastic sort of people I work with on a very regular basis. So I love them, in fact, all of them. Having said this, I am getting one more question, so I would not really say no to it. We have another 2 minutes to answer that, exactly 6 to 10. Ruchi Gupta, your question, please. Sorry, I muted you again. Unmute yourself and ask your question. Yeah, please go ahead, Ruchi.
It was really a very nice session. We learned a lot. But with that, I just want to ask, like, as you said, that we should be like open to talk. There should be conversation and all that. But what if someone is not good at this? Means I just found that I'm very weak in this. I just want to talk this much that how are you? If somebody says yes, I'm fine. I also wanted to say this much only that I'm fine and not else. Means I actually not take interest. So how to make ourselves interested in this or how to enjoy this sort of conversation so that somebody can be open with us. We can also open to someone and this can be easier to us. That's all. Thank you. It's
Ruchi ji, thank you for opening up with so much of vulnerability with this question. I really appreciate you saying this. So one ma'am, being curious and interested in another human being is a conscious choice. Sometimes we are naturally drawn to it and sometimes we have to develop that knack. Both are possible with practice, I would say that. If you simply start with a curious standpoint about, tell me about you. As a psychologist, I know that you can use reflection, which means that you can just repeat what the other person said back. And that is a good conversation starter and continuer. You don't have to put in a lot of effort, but the idea is also to actively suspend everything else that is going on in your mind and make completely yourself available to this one person in front of you. That is a commitment and it would come, it cannot be imposed on anyone. It has to come from within. And if you think you start feeling impatient when you are in those situations, but you want to hone that skill, I would say start by practicing probably 2 or 3 minutes with any willing partner who is ready to talk to you. You can slowly build that skill to 5 minutes and then 15 minutes. But I would say that to you with experience, you can build that skill up. And more willing listeners I have like you, Ruchi ji, world will be a better place. I rather have many of you.
Deepji, any observation? Then we'll close.
All right. Thank you. I waited for quite some time. Ma'am Geetika, wonderful to listen to you. Okay, so I do got a lot of confirmation. What I was thinking was not wrong. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Okay. I just want to reflect on just two things. That one is genuinity of the things basically, and expectations. Somehow I feel that we all expect everything from same child. If one is good in the class, everyone should be like him. If one is a dancer, everyone should be a dancer. If one is a debater, every child should be debating like him. I think this is one thing which we all have to understand. And not only from children, also from teachers. As a principal, we start thinking that each teacher will behave equally. Let us not put these kind of impositions. Let us not put such kind of untrue demands basically from colleagues as well as from children. That is what is my one point to everybody. Second point, which I feel that we should be conveying the purpose that what is being done to the children as such. As a teacher of physics, I have seen that most of us do not know why we are teaching the subject. I taught physics for life. I never taught for any exam. I never finished my syllabus in my lifetime. I made children to do it on their own. I made them independent, that man, go and make your own life. Don't depend on me. The same thing I do want to say, that teachers cannot start making bonds because principal wants it. Or my Geetika is a counselor and we have to, because she took a session and gave a 2 hours training. So we all become counselor and become master of making bonds. It's a serious investment. It only can happen because somebody want to do it. He cannot have to do it. So these are all like a mother and a child. All right, mother does nothing because she has to do it. She does it because she want to do it. So that is what I think boils down to such kind of conversations we are having about making bonds and giving them comfort and whatnot. I think this is what I wanted to share here, that we have to be very genuine about such kind of thing. Teaching can be done without being genuine. The notes can be given anyway, no problem. Syllabus can be completed without getting involved altogether. And it has been happening all around. We all know very, very well. And we know the effect of it. We get marks. We have no idea what is happening to us. But what we talk today, it cannot happen because somebody wants it. It only can happen when a person himself or herself genuinely wants it. I was in boarding school for a long time, and on that basis of the experience, I can share this with you, that the most important thing is genuinity about it. Mr. Gaurav, this is what is my take on it. I'm sorry if I.
No. As I said, अभी आपको official हमारा closing remarks सब आप ही की तरफ से जाएगा हमेशा. नहीं. No, but having said this, on a very serious note, I think someone echoed the similar sentiment. You speak from your heart, and obviously you're very, very experienced. So always a pleasure having you with us. Yeah.
Ma'am, Geetika, I want to say something on it. It'll be very kind of.
Geetika ji, I think Geetika, you there, right?
Yes, I'm very much here.
Yeah, so I think Dr. Khare was making broadly an observation basis the session and more importantly his own experience, and we really value his thoughts as well. And having said this, thank you for your lovely session. I would say fantastic, and in fact I would personally say that I will look forward to host you sometime soon as well, and we'll drive that conversation separately. So everyone who stayed back, thank you very much for your valuable time. Geetika, once again, thank you. And as I said, hope to see you all tomorrow. Yeah, it is tomorrow as well. Yes, tomorrow and day after tomorrow. Then we'll end this marathon. Thank you very much. Take care, stay safe, and do wear your mask. Yes, take care.
Bye-bye, all of you.
Bye-bye.